What I want to talk today about is how you can apply some of the gamification, game mechanic principles to what would be a big idea in helping move money more efficiently in a new type of payment economy. So I'm going to go through some of the principles about how we might do that and how that could take shape. So a little background on me. Scavenger is the parent company of LevelUp. We started that about 4 years ago, and we worked to create what we call the game layer on top of the world, using game mechanics, using gaming principles to influence behavior in the real world. Most of this was applied to all sorts of fun social interactions where we'd work with big brands to create everything from treasure hunts to orientation events on campuses, big brands, small brands, and everything in between. People have been using game dynamics and gamification to do all sorts of things, everything from education reform to climate change to all sorts of industries. And I want to talk today about how we can apply some of those things again in payments. The place I want to start is talking about the industry that could be disrupted by introducing these mechanics into payments. And the interchange industry, the credit card industry, Amex, Visa, MasterCard, Discover Card, and the banking industry, they operate on something they call interchange. And this interchange is a huge, huge cost to businesses. Many of the folks in the room might have businesses or work for companies that pay millions and millions of dollars worth of interchange. In fact, the 2 to 20%, call it tax, that is placed on businesses and retail throughout the world amounts to about a $50 billion industry. That $50 billion is simply for moving money. So there's no additional value added. It's simply to move the $5 in your pocket to Starbucks. That tax is put on top of that, just for moving that money. So there's in my opinion, a lot of room for disruption there. So to put some context around this, when you buy a pack of gum for $1.20 at your convenience store, the actual cost to that retailer can be as high as $1.50 because of the swipe fee that's charged and the per valorum additional percentage that's charged. When you go to buy a cheese pizza, you're actually paying, that retailer is paying an additional $1.13, 4.5 cents on top, or 4.5% on top of what that cost for him is. So big, big, big things, big money that interchange accounts for. So, wouldn't it be amazing if that could move to zero? $50 billion market down to zero. Wouldn't that be incredible? The way that this could happen, and this is a big idea, and so some of this is going to be theoretical, and I'll try to bring it to reality and how some of these principles can be applied. But if you think about the last industry that was made to move frictionlessly, you think about the internet, information. And think about what information and the frictionless movement of that information enabled in this world that we live in today. Things have accelerated. The demand for information has gone through the roof. The economic boom that comes along with that, incredible. Google creates an incredibly efficient means for marketers to reach consumers in a direct way, all paid for performance. Incredible, incredible stuff. The same thing could happen with payments. And if we get that cost, that $50 billion down to zero, what could that mean in the economy? Everything from small businesses to large businesses. Some of what Miklos was talking about earlier in mobile not really finding its way in the bucket of advertising dollars that has happened because it's just not a fully connected system yet. So we're going to talk about some things that I think will share some insight. Huge opportunity. So how do we get there? Well, for such a big idea, it's going to take a lot of work. And these 2 steps are important, but they're complicated. So how do we get costs down, and how do we get revenue to go up? You talk about what the internet has done with the economic boom that created. We'll talk about how the revenue goes up in a second, but how do we get the costs down? So you get costs down through technological innovation and maybe some legislation. So over time, the past 30 years, interchange has done nothing but go up and up and up. Everything from regular credit card fees to swipe fees. The incremental, every time you swipe a credit card, went from 2 cents to 5 cents to 25 cents to 35 cents, and up and up and up. All of a sudden, with the introduction of mobile technology companies like LevelUp and some others, we've been able to see this trend go down in the past few years. How is that happening? Well, with companies like Dwolla, ISIS, LevelUp included, Google Wallet, Square, we are positioning ourselves in between the consumer and the merchant. And the banks and the credit card companies getting in the way of those transactions, adding real value, give us an opportunity to disrupt in a way where we can create more value for both the business and for the customer. So Square has a 2.75 flat % transaction fee. They get rid of the swipe fee entirely, and they're able to do that and run a sustainable business, as well as some of these other ones. So this is the old world, where a consumer would open the wallet, you take out good old Ben Franklin with cash, or you take out your Amex card, and the merchant would receive that money. This is the new world. With different types of funding sources, and with a mobile device in your pocket that's intelligent, you can tie different types of funding sources to essentially have your pick of how you want that money to move. Now, as a consumer, you're thinking, well, why would I do that? It's super easy for me to take out my credit card, swipe it, be paid, and be done. So what's in it for you? What's in it for the merchant? Well, if the merchants were able to provide incentives to you that made it worth your while to take a new direction in how you did those things, you've got this type of landscape, where you can pick your funding source, you can pick your provider of how you want that money to move, and of course you can tie that to even Visa, MasterCard, Discover. But at the end of the day, it always comes down to value. Why is this important to you? And how does this affect your wallet? How does this affect how you use your devices? So the phone is a computer. It knows who you are. It knows what you do. Liz was talking a little bit earlier about being able to drive targeted incentives when you're at All Recipes and you download a shopping list, being able to act on those things. And I propose that a big reason for why mobile has not really found its way in terms of the advertising dollars that have moved through it, it's because there's no connection from a display banner online to an actual action that is trackable in store in the real world. And this is where all this disruption can come from. So when you've got more competition, you've got interchange going down, and the ability to capitalize on top of that is where we get from there. The second part of getting costs down is part of the reason is thanks to this man here, Dick Durbin. He's a senator who, for the past several years, have gotten very aggressive around the banking legislation and basically saying the credit card companies have been charging fees on debit card swipes as if they were credit cards. Now, of course, debit cards are backed up by your bank account, so there's money there. There's really no risk involved. But the credit card companies, the banks, were charging the same rate they were charging for extending credit to consumers. Huge, huge, huge money for these credit card companies. And Dick Durbin said, that's not fair. So let's change things. And with a swipe of legislation called the Durbin Amendment, he was able to fix the price of debit card swipes, essentially creating an environment that makes it advantageous and saves small businesses a lot of money for people using debit cards instead of credit cards. So there is a shift there to getting those costs down for interchange. Dick Durbin's a big advocate for that. So is it good for everyone? With small ticket items, it can hurt some merchants who sell $1 cup of coffee, and they've now got an interchange rate for a debit card that still costs them 20 cents. But in the vast majority of instances, it was a positive, net positive for the entire economy. So the path to interchange zero, getting costs down, getting increased competitors, LevelUp, Square, all of these technology firms, particularly in mobile, driving hard at getting that down to next to nothing. and working really both with payment processors and banks, sometimes against them, and with a government who's looking out for the small business, making sure they're not getting taken advantage of by these credit card companies. We have some movement toward what could make money move faster. So let's talk about revenue. Let's talk about how could we see an economic boom from things like game dynamics and through the introduction of technology with mobile, what those things could look like. So when you look at the current model, this red line up here, if you look at $100 that's spent at a business, that red line represents the 5% tax that they're paying, the $5 that goes directly to the credit card company. In a new model, you essentially have 100% of that $100 moving directly to the merchant. Customer pays $100, the merchant gets $100. What I want to talk about is how can we, and how can, through all this technological innovation, can we create a lift in the economy by giving tools to businesses, to brands, to merchants, to incentivize more targeted spends, influencing customer behavior, delivering value to everyone involved. And I think that's the type of new economy that could be one where we all can benefit. So let's talk about some of the things that could do that. My particular expertise in our companies is rooted in game dynamics. And so I want to talk about these specific dynamics, how they apply to the real world, and how they could be applied in an economy where we're getting rid of interchange and enabling businesses to make more money with smarter devices in our pockets. So the first one is sunken reward. As a principle, a sunken reward is something that you don't have to do a lot of work to get. So it's $1 off that exists at a merchant already. You don't have to go, you don't have to spend money ahead of going to redeem this. If you think about the World of Warcraft, I don't know if this is quite the nerdy group that some of the other places we talk at are, but World of Warcraft, they incentivize you to just visit other levels. And you're getting rewarded for visiting, just checking out more parts of the game. And so those rewards are just there. And if you don't go and claim them, that's a sunk reward for you. So how does this come into reality? There's a company called Scoutmob that instead of a daily deal where you're spending $10 to get $20 of goods and services, instead, all you have to do is show up. All you have to do is go and have dinner at this place at Costello's Tavern, and you're getting 50% off. That is there for you, not much effort. And of course, you're rewarded as a customer for doing so. When you tie that to transactions, you get some interesting things. The way this plays out, through industry analysis, I use the daily deal as a benchmark against the sunken reward. But when you spend $10 for $20 of goods and services on a Groupon or a Living Social or anything like that, you as a consumer want to spend exactly $20. In the parlance of a game, if you spent below $20, you didn't fully get the value that you could have gotten. You feel a little cheated, so you're not real happy. If you spend more than $20, you feel like you've paid too much. This is called benchmarking. You're benchmarking yourself against what you've already come out of pocket with. Now, consumers across that entire industry, you see only a 25% lift in spend with a deal like that. Versus a sunken reward, in the case of a Scoutmob, where there's maybe a coupon or a deal waiting for you that you don't have to spend money to get, you get as much as almost 5 times the spend that you would normally see. So if a $10 coupon is waiting at Costello's Tavern for you, or 50% off, consumers behave in a way where they're spending multiples of what they would have spent. So interesting stuff. This is the first of the 3 dynamics, one that's powerful. The second one I want to talk about is the progression dynamic. This is a game mechanic, is one that you're all familiar with in a myriad of ways. Everything from frequent flyer programs, where you're a silver to a gold, to a platinum, to a chairman. This idea of progression over time, where you are stimulated as a customer, as a consumer, to follow a path, is extremely motivating. The idea of LinkedIn begging you to have people recommend you on there, and you're only 85% of the way to having a complete profile on LinkedIn, you are naturally inclined to get that done. This is a progression dynamic, enormously powerful. Many of the companies in the technology space that are doing things around this are Punched, Perka, Perkville. I think there's one called Percocet. But traditional loyalty programs. You get a punch card, every 10 cups of coffee, you get one. Basically encouraging you to do more, spend more. So when you tie it to transactions, you get some powerful outcomes. This is a chart of a LevelUp merchant who has a loyalty program in place. The green bars represent new customer acquisition, which is not necessarily the goal of a loyalty program. And the blue represents repeat customers. So as you can see over time, it's doing just what it's supposed to. It's getting more people coming back more often. So we're creating a community of users over time who are then spending more money. So this progression dynamic, this loyalty program, anybody who's in retail understands that it's enormously powerful. And yet again, just another dynamic that can influence behavior. The third dynamic I want to talk about is what's called the appointment dynamic. And this one is the more advanced of the three, but I think interesting when you look at what could be the future of advertising, particularly as it relates to mobile. And this starts to get really exciting. So you guys, I don't know if everybody knows this, but Tamagotchi, anybody? Anybody? Okay. So you feed it every 3 hours or the thing dies. And kids throw it away, and I'm sure parents in the room who bought these things equate it to a pet rock. But the idea is that there's a temporal component to this. The best example of this one is Farmville. We've got to go back and water your crops on Facebook every so many hours, and if you do so, you're rewarded, and it goes on and on and on. Right? This is a powerful driver, particularly for Zynga, which basically Farmville took them public. But when you start to apply that beyond just games, hardcore games, and you apply it to commerce and transactions, things like ThinkNear, a company who's encouraging you to take action at particular points of time. So the one they've got on their homepage, don't let the rain stop you. Come in for a free 7-day pass when it's raining outside. Anybody who's in retail or restaurants know that when it rains, business is typically pretty slow. This is a graph of the inches of precipitation against the transaction volumes that we see in the city of Philadelphia. And you see these spikes here. Of course, the volume of transactions is much lower on days when you've got lots of rain. So having a technology, having a way to encourage and motivate behavior in times of slow traffic could be enormously powerful. Incentivizing you to come into lunch when you perhaps weren't going to on a particular day could be enormously powerful. So when we talk about how do we grow revenue, it's talking about taking opportunities that currently don't exist, people who spend huge amounts of money on display ads, which I think is hugely outdated, and being able to target a specific offer to a customer based on things they've bought previously, where they are, having an offer come to you perhaps when you're walking by a place. All of these things are possible when you introduce smarter technology into a consumer's pocket, i.e. their phones, and the type of velocity we can achieve when small businesses are now not paying this 5 to 20% tax, rather having the opportunity to invest that money into their consumers' pockets and growing their revenues as a result.